Well, let's talk about your book, and how you were able to start kind of coming up with the idea for it, writing it. So I think this is a really fascinating book, Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets.
Well, what happened was during COVID, they shut down everything I loved. Everything. The places I taught in, the gym I went to, the movie theater I'd go to, the restaurants I ate in. Everything I loved was shut down. I was even doing heel managing on the indies, and that went by the wayside also. And it was a very grim time. And I was basically in the epicenter, in Queens, New York. The airports all converge here, LaGuardia, Kennedy. And there were 800 people a day getting COVID, and five of my friends died. Five.
Oh
And
man, I'm so
I,
sorry.
yeah, it was a terrible 3 years. And I basically said to myself, I have to throw myself into something constructive, or, you know, I, I'm going to lose it. It was just a miserable period. And I started basically writing a piece a day, like a writer's lifestyle. Like, instead of waking up and going to the gyms were closed for a long time. I would get up and just start writing. And what I did was, in chronological order, tell my life story in 100 true stories. And a lot of these involved wrestling. And a lot of them sadly involved tragedies, like the death of Tiger Khan, who worked for the Hearts. Melissa Coates, who was at my wedding. Um, she was in WWE's.
Developmental.
Yeah, she was in OVW, I believe, and she had some appearances on some of their pay-per-views, but they never fully signed her. Um, Nicole Bass was a dear friend. I was at her deathbed the night before. They pulled the plug the next morning. I was at the hospital. So I tell a lot of these stories, but it's not all grim. There's some funny stuff in there. On 9/11, 2003. I'm on a plane, 9/11. I was on a plane 2 years to the day with Johnny Valiant going from Philly to New York, one of these little 20-seater puddle jumpers. And the pilot looked like a bad guy in an action movie. He looked rough. He had a beard and he was an ugly guy. He didn't look like one of these clean-cut pilots that you usually see. And Johnny Valiant's looking at me, and I'm looking at Johnny, and Johnny whispers, "Did you see this guy? Did you see this guy?" We're thinking it's a terrorist. So we're on this plane and it's hitting turbulence. You feel everything. It's a little tiny plane with 20 people on it. And we're looking at each other like, are we going down, Johnny? Is this plane going down? So obviously it didn't, because I'm here talking about it. But there's some humor in the book as well, some funny stories, and but yeah, I basically told my life in 100 quote unquote vignettes, and you really get to know some of these people on a personal level. There's pieces on Johnny, Jimmy Valiant, Nikolai, Iron Sheik, Nicole Bass, Melissa Coates, Lanny Poffo, Bruno Sammartino, Killer Kowalski. I mean, I poured my heart out because most of them are gone. Here's a funny story that's in there.
Yeah.
Greg Valentine is a dear friend. He'd sleep on my couch when he was in town. We'd book him for autograph appearances and such. So Greg, I live in an apartment. Greg walks out of my building with me. All of a sudden, we hear this car just screech. You hear the tires screech. Guy runs out of the car and goes, "You're Greg Valentine." And, and Greg goes, "Yes, I am." So he's stopping traffic at age 70, whatever, you know. So there's some funny stories in there like that. But yeah, it's been the good, the bad, and the ugly, the joy and pain of all of this, being involved in wrestling and filmmaking and teaching and juggling it all and making it work. It's
Yeah.
we like I said, the wrestler took 7 years. I got paid 7 years later. The bills are still coming in. So you always juggled everything, and that's what
Yeah.
the book's about.
Yeah, I mean, you're able to bring back, basically bring these stories of the people that, unfortunately are no longer with us back to life by telling these stories about, the good times that you shared with them and the making of the wrestler and just being just present for so many moments that are just so unforgettable.
Oh yeah, I have a piece in there. I was at Madison Square Garden the night that Jimmy Snuka leapt off the cage on Don Morocco. I was at that. So
Ooh.
Mick Foley was in the audience as a teenager also. We're pretty close in age. So Snuka climbs the cage. I'm looking at my best buddy Scott Birdstein, and I'm like, no, he's not going to do this, is he? And he then we realize he is going to do it, and he leaps up first. He's leaping up before he lands, and this is again pre-cell phone. A million flash cubes go off. Flash
Mm.
cubes. And I tell people it was the most exciting moment I ever saw in pro wrestling. Not the greatest match I ever saw, but the most exciting moment. And it's just like there forever because the YouTube video has been seen by millions and millions of people,
Yeah, it's
and
viral.
it's an iconic moment. I write about that in the book, and I was at many iconic moments. I was there when Dynamite Kid wrestled Tiger Mask at the Garden, and this was a super heavyweight territory. And these guys, it was like they were coming from another planet. We never saw anything like it. We didn't know what hit us, like our mouths were open. We're used to these big lumbering 300-pound guys wrestling Bruno or Backlund or Hogan, and it was amazing. Amazing.